At the start of the movie 5 centimeters per second, two kids go to McDonald's. They talk about prehistoric animals, and one says her favorite is hallucigenia. They then arrange the French fries they're eating into its shape. It's easy to dismiss this as nothing more than an incidental detail, and you probably should, but that's boring. So I'm going to come up with as many symbolic interpretations of this dead worm as I possibly can. But first, a quick plot recap. Our aforementioned two kids are Takaki and Akari. They are in love with each other and spend a lot of time together. Eventually, Akari moves far away, but Takaki can still reach her by taking a very long train ride. However, she then has to make another move that will make it impossible for him to meet her, so he takes the train to meet her one last time. The train is continually delayed, and it seems doubtful that they will reunite, but they do. The next morning, Takaki goes home, and Akari later moves away. A few years later, Takaki is now in high school, and he's still thinking about Akari. One of his classmates, Kane, is in love with him, and eventually works up the courage to confess. Unfortunately for her, she gets interrupted by a rocket launch. Even more unfortunately, when she sees how Takaki's looking at the rocket, she comes to the realization that he will never return her feelings because his mind is obsessed with something else, Akari, and gives up. A couple of years after that, Takaki is now an adult living in Tokyo. He's still thinking about Akari, and this makes him very sad and distant from everyone else. Meanwhile, Akari has long since forgotten him, and is now coming to Tokyo to get married to someone else. She is, overall, a lot happier than he is. Then, in the final scene of the movie, they cross paths by happenstance, seem to recognize each other, and turn around to get a better look. But a train gets in the way. Takaki waits for the train to pass, but Akari walks away. Takaki then smiles, and walks away as well. Wow, pretty great story, right? Now let's go worm hunting. We can begin our analysis with the literal surface level of hallucigenia, its appearance. Hallucigenia is a pretty simple looking creature. It's just a big stick with some small sticks poking out of it. Perhaps this simplicity is meant to mirror the simple nature of Takaki and Akari's childhood, a time when they didn't have to deal with the kinds of obstacles and complications they have to deal with later in life, and could instead just be happy together. Continuing this appearance-based analysis, hallucigenia somewhat resembles railroad tracks, and a lot of this movie's story revolves around trains. Hallucigenia's branching structure also resembles a tree, another important part of this movie's story. So it's possible that hallucigenia was chosen simply because it bears a visual resemblance to some of the key imagery of this movie. Of course, there's one major difference between hallucigenia and a tree. There's at least a couple of trees around today, while all the hallucigenia that have ever existed are dead as doornails. Maybe then, the placement of an extinct creature in the middle of Takaki and Akari's relationship is a sort of memento mori, a piece of imagery foreshadowing its ultimate demise at the hands of time. Fossils don't merely remind us of the inevitability of death, though. The mere existence of fossils calls back to long-gone eras of Earth's history. In other words, fossils direct us to think of the past. The past is an incredibly important part of 5 centimeters per second story, as it's the thing that shapes Takaki's behavior and causes his isolation. The inclusion of hallucigenia, then, could signal the past's importance to the movie story. Of course, all those years fossils spent in the ground caused layers of rock to build up around them. As a result, paleontologists must dig through tons of rock to reach fossils like that of hallucigenia. This act of overcoming a great obstacle to reach a goal is quite similar to how Takaki must endure a long and grueling journey to reunite with Akari at the start of the movie. So hallucigenia, a being that requires struggle to unearth, might represent those struggles. Although paleontologists have to work hard digging and dusting, the fossils they pursue are inactive, frozen in place and unchanging for hundreds of millions of years. If we focus on this unchanging nature, hallucigenia becomes a symbol of stasis. It's a being that, much like Takaki, is unable to change even as time moves on past it. Given that hallucigenia is extinct precisely because it failed to adapt to a changing environment, its inclusion could even foreshadow the struggles and anguish that Takaki will face due to his inability to move on from the past. In stark contrast to the stasis interpretation, our next interpretation is all about movement. Once again examining hallucigenia's shape, we find that it sort of resembles a bunch of branching paths leading out from a starting destination. In this way, the shape of hallucigenia echoes the diverging paths, both literal and figurative, that Takaki and Akari take in life. The roads that Takaki and Akari walk over the years result in them changing a great deal. Hallucigenia walked a similar path of radical change, fossilization. This process changed it from dead organic tissue to a radically different form. If we focus on this idea of change, then we can conclude that hallucigenia represents the changes that Takaki and Akari undergo throughout the movie. It isn't just hallucigenia's physical body that's transformed. Our understanding of it has also shifted over time. When it was first discovered, scientists believed that hallucigenia walked on what we now know are its back spines. This idea of people holding multiple contradictory viewpoints towards a single creature mirrors Takaki and Akari's differing views on their relationship. One clings onto it for years, while the other lets go. Hallucigenia, which has been the subject of a similar situation, might represent that difference in viewpoint. So far, we've focused an awful lot on how hallucigenia existed after its death. But what about the life it lived? Well, hallucigenia lived in the ocean, a place where it had to carry the weight of a massive column of water on its back. It was, in essence, constantly laboring beneath a great burden. A burden similar to the one Takaki bears because of its clinging to the past. So, hallucigenia is potentially a symbol of those burdens. For a creature that's able to withstand so much crushing pressure, Hallucigenia is remarkably tiny, coming in at little more than 2 inches long. In comparison to other creatures of its time, it was quite small and weak. So then, Hallucigenia could represent powerlessness, the very powerlessness that Takagi and Akari experience in the face of forces outside of their control that ultimately tear them apart. But at least, even when separated from each other, they still had people around them. Hallucigenia had no such luck. The fossils we've got today are a lonely bunch. A couple of ragtag remnants of a long-dead species that have been sealed away in rocks for hundreds of millions of years. Hallucigenia could therefore represent isolation. Much as Hallucigenia fossils are very alone, Takagi feels very isolated in his adult life, going as far as to feel kinship with a space probe floating through the endless expanse of space, a situation that mirrors a Hallucigenia corpse surrounded by endless layers of rock in every direction. Well, I'm out of ideas. There is nothing left to explore about Hallucigenia. Oh wait, the name! Hallucigenia's name is very similar to hallucinate, a word that evokes ideas of dreams and visions. Takagi and Akari both have dreams about each other, so Hallucigenia is potentially a symbol of these dreams. Or maybe, we should just take the name completely literally and conclude that the entire story of 5 centimeters per second is a hallucination Takagi is having as he freezes to death on the train and comes to terms with his own death and how he's never going to be able to reunite with Akari. Fun.